How do middle-class employees cope with cross-class anxiety at work? In this video, I'm going to talk about the middle-class part of the classwork framework. Researchers propose that when people are put in situations when they're around people of another social class, that it makes them uncomfortable and produces anxiety. And to mitigate this anxiety, they do classwork. Now, the middle class is in a unique situation because a lot of American organizations and such are structured based on middle class norms. That is why I've done research on the unwritten rules of work for people from low income backgrounds, because norms of the lower class are not institutionalized. However, middle class people also experience status panic when they're around upper class people, which is the desire to be accepted and to impress. And they might try to pass and conceal their own social class to try to be accepted by this group. Now, they can also have a hatred for the lower classes because they can see any gains that the lower class gets as being at their expense instead of hating the upper class, who arguably would be deciding those gains. So with classwork, there's always intrapersonal, what you do internally, and interpersonal, what you do with others. For intrapersonal, the researchers hypothesize that middle class experiences the fear of falling, which is the fear of losing your job and losing your privileges associated with being middle class. You have enough to be afraid to lose it, but you don't have so much that you have a safety net. And to ease some of this anxiety, middle class people might practice self-justifying and self-protective behaviors, like believing in the myth of meritocracy and that everything's going to be okay because if they work hard enough, they'll be rewarded and it won't go away. Disavowing the idea that there's any rigged game that they could lose that would take it all away. And absolving themselves of any blame for the harms to the other classes or themselves by blaming the upper class completely. The researchers hypothesize that they might leverage this myth of meritocracy interpersonally. So the myth of meritocracy is the idea that everybody gets fair treatment. It's all through hard work. There's no rigged game. And middle class people might use this to form what the researchers call a collective reality, which is where they might advocate for systems that benefit themselves, but frame them to be morally superior. So, for example, saying like, of course, everybody deserves to have a good education, but then advocating for policies that keep education inaccessible for people who are from lower classes. Because these statements sound like they're noble and they're hard to argue against when they're that broad, but they are based on the assumption that everything is currently fair. And the middle class perceives that what is currently happening is working for them, even if it's not completely. And that's part of that self-preservation internally. The other thing they might do interpersonally is create distinction between them and the lower classes, because their entire status is built on that they're not as bad as the poor, right? So they might do things like bring up their educational achievements or how prestigious their job is, even if it makes the same amount of money as someone in service work or blue collar work. Or they might perpetuate stereotypes about people who are lower income, such as that they're uneducated, smelly, unhygienic, or crass. What do you think about this framework? Have you seen this? Follow for what classwork is like for upper class people?